Teaching is pretty lonely. I like to have the kind of supervision where you feel like you have some adult contact, because there's no way to evaluate yourself except by your own standards. And for all you know, there might be people doing things 100 times better than you are that you'll never learn about because you're there with just those 30 bodies every day.
Teachers spend most of the day behind closed classroom doors. On their own with 30 students, sometimes up to 150 per day, they rarely get a chance to share ideas about teaching with colleagues in the next classroom or down the hall. And there's hardly ever any time in the school day to think over lessons taught, to figure out what went right or why it didn't.
Having a colleague come in a supervisory role and observing me, I think is real useful in helping me find the little things that I can do better in teaching, as opposed to giving me a general picture of, yes, you're okay as a teacher, or no, you aren't, and just have a checklist.
Teachers make thousands of decisions each day, often without feedback about their work. Supervisors or coaches can help teachers get a different perspective on these decisions. Supervisors can be another set of eyes. This tape is about communicating, person to person, talking with teachers in an atmosphere of trust, and helping them with what they do on a daily basis. We all communicate differently, some of us more easily than others. In this program, we will show you how you can increase your effectiveness as a supervisor and coach by using the conferencing skills of trust building, questioning, responding, and empowering. We will see how these communication tools can build trust and help teachers gain greater confidence in their teaching and decision-making.
There was a lot of participation. You said if it looked good, you thought the noise level would go up. Did you think it went up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did too.
I don't think I know it went up.
Were you comfortable?
The idea of helping another person think through a situation by the way in which you ask questions and respond is part of the cognitive coaching model developed by Arthur Costa and Robert Garmston at California State University at Sacramento. Throughout the program, they will explain and model conferencing skills and show how supervisors can use them in the pre-conference and post-conference to help teachers plan lessons, teach, reflect and analyze, and apply new ideas to future lessons.
Did you hear what happened here? They didn't even get the right assignment.
In order for a supervisor or coach to communicate with teachers, there must be trust between them. Only when two people feel they are working toward the same goal with mutual understanding and professional respect can positive results be accomplished.
When I trust someone, I have a tendency to feel like we're in it together. The school is our school, not their school. If I don't trust them, I have a tendency to do what I want in the room, and I don't seek them out for advice. I don't seek them out to tell them, hey, I did this today and it was neat, come take a look at it. I just wouldn't communicate with them in that way.
If I get feedback from somebody that I really, really trust, I take it as a suggestion, and I usually mull it over in my mind and put it to good use. If I take feedback from a supervisor that I haven't built up trust, I just let it go over my head and probably in one ear and out the other and not pay much attention to it. It's more of a criticism than a suggestion.
If I'm trying to establish my relationship with a teacher, trying to establish a level of trust with that teacher, at the time I'm observing them, that's probably not going to work. I'm able to move in and out of classrooms without creating much distraction because of the relationship I have with them outside of that setting.
Building trust is an ongoing, long-term goal. But there are some things a supervisor can do on a moment-to-moment basis in the immediacy of a conference to build trust by developing rapport.
Our reason for talking about these trust behaviors is to let supervisors know they don't have to be stuck with the relationship as it is. There are some things they can do to be proactive in turning a non-trusting relationship into a trusting one so that communication can open and learning take place.
The trust-building skills of rapport building and presupposition offer ways in which supervisors can start to develop trusting relationships. The first trust-building skill we will look at is rapport building. When two people trust each other, they are naturally in rapport. They tend to match each other verbally and non-verbally, in what they say and in what they do. A supervisor can create a feeling of comfort and rapport with a teacher by using the rapport-building skills of paraphrasing content, matching voice tone and rate, and matching the posture and gesture of the other person. The paraphrase is the most widely used verbal matching technique for building rapport. By listening non-judgmentally to what the teacher says, the supervisor simply paraphrases or matches the teacher's content.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit about what you'd like me to look for today while I'm in your room?
I like you to look for clarity in my directions. Are they logical? Is the sequence good?
So
Do the kids seem to understand?
what you want me to pay attention to is the clarity of your directions. You're interested in the sequencing?
The paraphrase helps to establish rapport and trust by communicating to the other person that he or she is important to us. The paraphrase can be used not only in a conference, but in other contexts. Its use is appropriate when you hear strong feelings, when you want to let a person know you understand what was said, and interestingly, when you're not sure you understand and want to check your comprehension.
Another way to build rapport is to match voice tone and rate of speech.
For example, when you hear intense feelings. Art, Mrs. Schofield's been in my classroom again. This is the third day this week. She barges right in. She doesn't ask permission. She doesn't check in the office. And I've told her, and she's just driving me nuts.
You're really frustrated with that interruption of your classroom.
Absolutely.
And I was able to go around later on and look at the papers. And what I saw in the papers looked like notes. What they were writing had to do with the topic.
Had something to do with chemistry.
Something to do with chemistry,
Okay.
yes.
In fact, one of the things I'm doing today is passing out new erasers. And I know that'll be part of it.
So you're giving out new erasers just to kind of alleviate some of the frustration
I know
of
they're gonna
someone.
have to
Yeah,
erase.
they'll need to erase.
In addition to matching what another person says, rapport can also be built by matching what the other person does, or by matching posture and gesture.
When two people are naturally in rapport, they actually match one another's posture. And they unconsciously mirror some of each other's gestures.
So your exemplars have taken that anticipation into account?
Yes, they have.
Okay. Okay. And at the end of the period then, you will know whether they have attained these rules by doing what?
When we've completed with going through both the acid and the base exemplars, they have verbalized that we've talked about the rules. There are times that I will go to the board and say, all right, let's put them together. I'll write some information on the board. They'll refine it. They'll change it around. They'll come up with one good statement. Then, if you'll note, you can look on the board when you go out there, you'll see I have 3 objectives listed up there.
Okay. So there are
In
several
this conference, you saw how the gestures of two people in rapport matched each other. Now, we're not suggesting that you go around matching everybody you come in contact with.
Indeed, they might lock you up if you did that.
They certainly would.
However, we do use this information in the following way. When I see signs of discomfort in another person, or when I'm about to have a conference and I anticipate that the other person might be uncomfortable, I have a mental checklist of things I can do to help lower the level of discomfort and create rapport to help the other person think.
The rapport-building skills of paraphrase content, match voice tone and rate, and match posture and gesture provide ways to communicate with teachers that say, we're on the same team. Now take a moment to stop the program and complete a rapport-building activity. Another way to build trust is by using the presupposition. The hidden meanings behind the words we say, or presuppositions, can help to build trust by conveying the idea that the supervisor believes the teacher is a competent and thoughtful professional.
I like to have somebody come to observe me if it's a person I respect, if I have a level of trust with them that I think they already think that I'm a good teacher and would like to help me to be an even better teacher. If it's somebody that I think is coming in there looking to find everything I do wrong, that's a totally different situation.
Presuppositions can be either positive or negative, and in both instances they powerfully affect how people respond, because teachers tend to behave as if the presupposition were true. For example, asking, if you were to teach this lesson again, wouldn't you want to assess students' readiness for learning first? Or, where did you go wrong in planning your lesson? Both of these examples suggest failure and imply negative value judgments. They tend to create defensiveness and lessen the teacher's willingness to take risks with you.
On the other hand, presuppositions can communicate positive values, and when they are expressed, they create high expectations, and teachers tend to live up to them. For example, as you planned this lesson, what did you hope for in terms of student behavior? Now notice how you've presupposed the teacher planned the lesson. The use of presuppositions can support positive relationships and continuing rapport. Subconsciously, teachers sense the high regard in which they are held by their supervisor.
Now, we'd like to have you examine the structure of some supervisor language. And as you do so, notice, please, the presuppositions embedded in the content.
Okay, and it sounds like you made a decision during the course of the lesson about that other objective.
I decided not to get them involved in that. Yeah, the other objective was to have them actually see if they could take the rules using their past knowledge of how to use a periodic table and oxidation states or valences, and be able to actually put together what would be acceptable or possible formulas for acids and bases.
What was it that caused you to drop that objective from the lesson today?
I thought it was one objective one step beyond where I wanted to go, that I felt comfortable.
Here, the supervisor presupposes that the teacher made a conscious choice to drop the objective. In this way, she acknowledges that she trusts his decision-making.
Is there anything else that you pay attention to as you monitor the directions you give?
Well, this is a lesson that I've never taught, and that always means that I'm not sure how it's going to go.
By presupposing that the teacher pays attention to what the students are doing as she gives directions, the supervisor builds trust. If the teacher had not been paying attention, the supervisor's presupposition makes her aware that it is something she could be doing.
Try to watch them.
We've seen that building and maintaining trust is an ongoing effort supported by what we say and do. It's the basis for the success of the conferencing skills of questioning, responding, and empowering. Before moving on to these skills, please take a moment to stop the program and complete an exercise using presuppositions.
You really gathered a lot of information.
Now that we've reviewed the importance of trust as a basis for all communication, we will see how supervisors' questioning skills can contribute to teacher growth and autonomy.
I'm a fixer. Okay? I mean, that's my style, or was my style. I have very high standards, and I have a real problem walking in as the evaluator into a classroom where things need to be fixed, and refraining from telling the teacher, you need to fix this.
Telling a teacher what to do may not always be the way to build trust and teacher confidence in their own decision-making. Telling may, in fact, slow down the process because it may make the teacher dependent on you, the supervisor, when your goal is to help the teacher to develop autonomy as a decision maker.
And I finally realized, after 3 years of being a principal, that things don't happen overnight. You don't go into a classroom and see 3 things that need to be fixed, meet with them after school and say, fix these 3 things, and walk in the next day and expect them fixed.
Many people think that supervisors are supposed to have all the answers. But if your goal is to get teachers to think more clearly about what they're doing, your questions actually may be even more important than any answers you might provide.
Questions can cause teachers to become conscious of the thoughts and decisions which underlie their classroom actions. Clearly, teachers make decisions throughout the teaching cycle. As supervisors and coaches, there are ways we can engage and enhance their thinking and decision-making. During the pre-conference, the supervisor can help the teacher clarify the plan and identify what data to gather while observing the lesson. In the post-conference, we help the teacher reflect on and analyze how the lesson went, and we explore ideas for future actions. The ultimate goal, of course, is that teachers will ask themselves these questions when you're not there.
A supervisor or coach can use questioning skills to help the teacher plan, teach, reflect and analyze, and apply. In the pre-conference, questioning skills can be used to help the teacher clarify the plan.
For example, prior to instruction, a teacher might envision what the students will be doing if the lesson is working. Now, as a supervisor, I might ask a teacher to think about that by saying, what student behaviors are you going to look for as indicators that your lesson is going as planned?
How will you know if the students are getting this as you go along?
During the interaction, nonverbal cues that I may get from them, nodding, eye contact with myself and the board.
What kinds of measures of success will you be looking for in the students as you're working with them?
For today's lesson, it will be first that they can actually transfer the shape onto the large graph paper of just the outline of the whole shape of the candy wrapper.
Also in the pre-conference, questioning skills can be used to determine what data to collect.
A question the supervisor can ask is, in addition to indicators of student achievement, what do you want me to look for in this lesson that will help you stretch and grow?
Now, you mentioned a little bit earlier that there was something that you'd like me to look for. What is it that you'd like me to do today when I'm in your classroom?
If you could watch the interaction of the students and involvement, engagement with me, and listen to the questions that I use.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about what you'd like me to look for today while I'm in your room?
I'd like you to look for clarity in my directions. Are they logical? Is the sequence good?
In the post-conference, the coach wants the teacher to reflect and analyze, to think about what happened in the lesson and compare it to what was planned.
As supervisors, we can help them with this process by asking certain questions. For instance, I might say something like, Bob, you wanted the kids to be on task during this lesson. What did you see happening?
I had the feeling, I don't know what you were saying, I had the feeling that I was talking with or working with only about 5 or 6 students.
What did they do that made you feel that way?
As I looked around the classroom, I felt as though I stopped losing eye contact.
When you think back to the directions that you gave to the students, did they seem appropriate? And do you recall that the students were able to follow the directions?
I thought the directions were logical, that the kids were able to follow what I was doing for the most part. Their frustration at doing it on the colored side of the candy wrapper instead of the white side was something I hadn't anticipated at all. Never dawned on me.
The supervisor's questions can also help the teacher see the overall effect of the lesson on student learning.
If you want the teacher to apply what they've learned from this analysis to future lessons, you might ask, Bob, if you were to do this lesson again, how might you do it differently?
If there were one thing that you were going to select from the lesson today that you wanted to carry forward to the next lesson, something that you've learned or gained from it, what would that be?
today, when in doubt, let the students interact with each other more. Be patient and give them the time to process information together. I guess that's the main thing.
So the more often a supervisor can ask questions that encourage teachers to think through what they're doing and come to their own conclusions, the more likely it will be that those teachers will continue to learn and refine their instructional decision-making. In other words, they will become autonomous, self-diagnosing, self-correcting, able to see where there may be problems, and able to suggest ways to correct them.
A supervisor or coach can use questioning skills to help the teacher plan, teach, reflect and analyze, and apply. Now please take a moment to stop the program and complete an exercise using questioning skills. Besides asking good questions, the supervisor needs to know how to respond to what the teacher says. In this segment, we'll review the responding skills of probe and clarify and paraphrase. These skills can be used in both the pre- and post-conference to help teachers sharpen their plans and to help supervisors understand the teacher's intent. To help a teacher become more specific, the supervisor can use the responding skill of probe and clarify.
The way in which a supervisor responds to what a teacher says can also influence how they think.
Art, the purpose of this lesson is that I want kids to understand the life cycle of a butterfly.
Bob, when you say understand, what will they be doing if they're understanding? What specific behaviors are you going to look for?
Well, they'll be making distinctions between the various stages of metamorphosis. Now, notice that Art caused me to become more specific by the way he responded to my ideas.
Here's another example. Bob, today I'm going to ask higher level questions in my lesson.
Art, when you use the term higher level questions, help me understand what you mean by that.
Well, I want the students to analyze and to predict and evaluate. So I'm going to ask some questions that are going to cause them to do that. You'll notice how Bob's probing and clarifying caused me to operationally define my terms.
The main objective that I have, the chemistry objective that I have for them today, initially is, when we get done, hopefully they'll have developed two rules. One for being able to identify the formula of acids, and the other to be able to identify the formula for bases.
Right, now when you say develop these formulas, what do you mean by that?
Well, what I'm hoping to have them do is actually on their own, through technique. I'm going to use concept attainment with this group.
Can I stop for just a second?
Sure.
When you say concept attainment, can you help me understand what you mean by concept attainment?
I'm going to use a series of examples, show them positive examples of, I'll start off with the acids.
Any other skills or goals that you have as far as the math part of the lesson?
Mostly, well, we've been working on fractions a lot, and so to take that quarter inch into the inch, I hope will give a more concrete realization of the fractions, because fractions are so nebulous to kids.
The probe and clarify responding skill also helps teachers think more carefully about the criteria they use to judge their lessons.
Art, today was great. The lesson was fantastic. It just went really well today.
You're really feeling good about your lesson.
Super, yeah.
Bob, what did you do specifically that made the lesson go so well? What did you see kids doing that made you feel so good?
Oh, listen, Art, I'll tell you, they started right away and they were on task all the way through. It's just perfect. Now, notice the effect that Art's response had on my thinking. I clarified for myself what criteria I would use to judge this lesson's success.
Okay, I hear a couple of things. I hear you saying to listen for your questions, and I also hear you saying to listen or look at the students and their engagement. Let's talk about the engagement for a moment. If students are engaged from your point of view, what would I see them doing?
Should see them leaning forward, the body movement positioned, facing where the activity is going on, which would be that side board.
How did you feel about the lesson in general?
Well, if I had to do over, I would leave out the part about multiplying and having it be 8 times bigger. That just seemed like one extra thing for kids to think about. And when I planned it, I thought that the ones that are really into art and into math would choose that. But there were all kinds of people making, what I thought, bad decisions about doing that.
Another responding skill is the paraphrase. In this case, it's used to help the supervisor understand the teacher's intent.
So really your outcomes for the lesson today then are first that they'll have some idea of proportion and spacing, that they begin to have an appreciation for art in real life, that they'll be able to translate or figure out the fractional changes that occur when you take something from smaller graph paper to larger graph paper. Is there anything else that I didn't get down, or?
No, I think that's basically it. The responding skills of probe and clarify and paraphrase can contribute to teacher growth and autonomy. Now, please take a moment to turn off the program and complete an exercise using responding skills. So far, we've discussed trust-building skills, questioning skills, and responding skills, and have seen how they can be used to engage and enhance teacher thinking and decision-making. In this segment, we will see how empowering skills can be used whenever a teacher needs to generate alternatives, accept responsibility, or become more precise in language and thought. These skills empower teachers to reach higher levels of autonomy.
When you think of superior teachers, you'll notice that they naturally see wide ranges of alternatives for instructional strategies, ways of organizing the classroom, ways to deal with discipline, or any number of instructional problems.
Let's first look at generating alternatives. Coaches can help teachers learn to generate alternatives by asking them to consider previous experience in similar situations.
Hey, Art, listen, I got to talk with you. I got a real problem with Michael. That kid is driving me nuts. Right up the wall. I just can't get him to settle down at all.
Bob, did you ever have a situation like that before that you solved successfully?
Well, I worked with Craig 2 years ago, and he was a problem kid, too. We did some nice things there.
And is there something then similar that you could do with Michael this time?
Well, actually, we started by getting his parents in, by getting the principal at that time in, and we worked out some nice things.
Might that work again for you now?
Yeah, it'd be a good place to start.
Here, the coach led the teacher to use past experience to generate alternatives to solve his present dilemma. Another way to generate alternatives is to look at a situation from the student's point of view.
I have had it with Susan. She's acting the class clown. She's having the kids in stitches. They love it, but I'll tell you, it's driving me nuts, and I can't get her to change that behavior.
Bob, what do you think is motivating Susan's behavior? Why do you think she's acting that way?
I don't know, unless it's just trying to get attention and trying to kind of draw the spotlight on herself.
Well, if you think that getting attention is her motivation, is there some way that you could provide that, some way that you could channel that energy?
Well, it's interesting. Now that you mention it, I could have her be like the classroom monitor and do some things like that.
Okay.
In this case, the teacher felt powerless to change Susan's behavior. Looking at it from her point of view, he understood and was able to come up with ways to change it. The supervisor can also ask the teacher to consider the consequences of his or her actions.
I am going to have Charlie stay after school, and he is going to write 100 times, "I will finish my math homework."
Bob, how do you think Charlie's going to feel about math if you have him stay after school and write that 100 times?
Well, I guess the reality is he's not going to like it very much.
Then is there another way that you could get Charlie to finish his homework?
Well, I think I might try some rewards as well as some consequences for not doing it.
That's
Maybe
another-
have a conference with them about that.
That's another alternative.
Considering consequences led the teacher to come up with a better solution to the problem with Charlie. The second empowering skill is helping the teacher accept responsibility for what happens in the classroom.
Superior teachers also take responsibility for student learning instead of blaming the curriculum or the parents or last year's teacher. They view instructional problems and ask themselves, what can I do to make improvements?
There are several things a supervisor can do to help teachers learn to accept greater responsibility. One is prescribe for themselves.
Bob, if the parents can't motivate those kids to learn, how can I teach them?
It's terribly frustrating, isn't it, Art?
It sure is.
Listen, what are some things that you might be able to do inside your classroom to help motivate those youngsters to learn?
Well,
now, notice how we are placing the responsibility in this response back to the teacher.
The supervisor can also suggest that the teacher choose among several courses of action.
Bob, I've just run out of ideas. Those kids just will not come into the classroom quietly and get ready for work.
So your well is run dry.
It certainly has.
Yes. Would you like some thoughts, Art, on what you might do?
I sure would.
Well, let me share with you about some things I've seen with other teachers. One teacher uses a list of things on the board, and when the students come in, they know that's what they're to do right away. A second teacher that I see uses a pattern where right after recess, there are papers on student desks, and when students enter the room, they know immediately that's their task for the first 5 minutes. And a third teacher lines the youngsters up outside the classroom, gives them instructions out there, and they file in and right away go to work. Now, of those ideas, Art, which of those might make some sense for you or be comfortable with what you know about your kids? Note again, please, that the supervisor here has generated several alternatives and caused the teacher to choose, so that the choice was still the teacher's responsibility.
A supervisor or coach can also help teachers recognize that what happens is a direct result of what they do, not a result of fate or luck.
Bob, what a wonderful day this was. That lesson went so well, I'll tell you, this is my lucky day.
Feels good, doesn't it, Art?
Sure does.
Listen, as you think about the day, what is it that you did that helped it go so well? Now, notice again, please, how the supervisor causes the teacher to take responsibility for their own success.
The supervisor can also help teachers see that they are responsible for improving a situation, instead of blaming outside factors for inadequacies in the classroom.
How do you expect me to teach these kids with the books? The books are older than the kids are.
They really get in the way of you're doing the job that you want to do, don't
Sure
they?
do.
Listen, Art, what's missing from the books that you could fill in? Now, notice again how the supervisor causes the teacher to identify what the teacher can do to correct the problem. A caution here. Sometimes there are constraints that do not fall within the teacher's control. Not enough desks in the classroom would be an example. And the supervisor needs to take some responsibility in helping resolve the problem.
Another empowering skill gives supervisors a way to help teachers become more precise in language and thought. When supervisors recognize vague verbs, self-imposed rules, overgeneralizations, and vague comparisons, they can respond in ways that encourage the teacher to become more precise. For example, vague verbs like learning or goofing off require more specification.
Art, these students this year are lazy.
Lazy, Bob? How specifically? What are they doing specifically that makes you think they're lazy?
Well, you know, they don't turn in their homework.
Self-imposed rules, signaled by words like can't, should, must, and necessary, indicate that teachers have set limits on themselves.
Art, you know, it's necessary that students complete this chapter by next Wednesday.
Necessary? What would happen if they didn't? Here's another example.
Art, I can't get that done. I'm sorry.
You can't? What's stopping you?
Well, that's a good question.
Overgeneralizations such as everybody, all, never, and always may indicate a lack of precise thinking.
Art, everybody watching this program is enjoying it.
Everybody? Every one of them?
Vague comparisons like brighter, better, worse, and faster require more precision when they are used without reference to what is being compared.
The people watching this program are much brighter.
Brighter than whom?
Yes.
When you hear a lack of precision in language, you are also probably hearing a lack of precision in thought. Supervisors can coach and probe teachers for more specificity in all of their contacts with them. The intent of this program has been to show how the supervisor's attitudes, strategies, and skills can influence and enhance teachers' capacities to modify themselves. We can help teachers think for themselves, be self-analytical, self-evaluative, and become even more confident as decision makers. In this process of supervision, we place the teacher in the role of the expert. Until we supervisors believe that the expert in any particular job is most often the person performing that job, we would forever limit the potential of that person.
We invite you to consider this thought from Carl Rogers. The degree to which I create relationships which facilitate the growth of others as separate persons is a measure of the growth I have achieved in myself.